Welcome to the Pastors Podcast, Season 8. We're back at it. Here we are again. Nate, it's so good to have you on the podcast. We're gonna talk to the other guests in just a second. But we were all original with the OG Pastors Podcast. The first one ever. I just laughed so hard when you were telling the story about how you got saved.
That was incredible. Best episode ever.
Guys, you would have to, Rachael and Andrew, I'm going to let you guys introduce yourself in a second, but the first time we ever did this podcast, which if you've never listened to the podcast, it's really, we're just trying to come alongside pastors and church leaders. Anybody that's in the trenches of building a local church, we want to do whatever we can to encourage you, equip you, hopefully also provoke you and disrupt you a little bit, but get you to think. But when we sat down, me, you, and Phil, and I asked the question, I'm like, so how'd you get saved? And literally, so if you know Nate, he's very like story, creative, poetic. He loves mystery. He doesn't want to get straight to the point. He wants to meander to the point.
Yes. We're going to get there.
He wants to take you on a journey to this point. Where I'm like, how'd you get saved? You know, and he goes, it was something like, well, it's the docks of what? What country?
It started 100 years ago.
On the docks. He goes,
stop.
On the docks of Norway.
Yeah, he goes, he literally, he goes, I said, how'd you get saved? He goes, started 100 years ago on the docks of Norway.
Stop.
And I was like, what? And then he goes on to tell some story about his great-great-grandpa or whatever else.
this guy to the Lord, that led this guy to the Lord.
I just want to know when you got saved in Sunday school class. I don't even know about the docks of Norway.
I thought you wanted the revival history of my family. We were going there.
He was so classic.
It's poetic. I love it.
It was, yes. And every time we tried to do, so Nate and I will work on things together. And like we'll do breakout sessions. I'm like, just give me the title of breakout session. Just what's it about?
That's it.
And then he wants to do a breakout session title that's kind of mysterious and leaves you like, ooh, what is that? I don't know what that is.
And that's cool until 3 people show up to the breakout.
Because they don't know what it is.
And 3 people do show up. And we go after it. Deep formation happens.
That's why Drew and I get along. Just tell me what it is. I just want to know what it is. I don't need I don't need a poem to tell me what it is.
Exactly.
Oh man, it's so true.
Have you had to wrestle with that in church world about how much can you actually tap into what you really want to do creatively and how much you just have to be practical with people?
Yeah, we've got people on our team that are so deeply functional and practical.
I love them already.
And they have to learn Nate. Because for me, it's all about storytelling and scenes and soundtracks and film. And they're like, what are you talking about? And I just assume everyone thinks that way.
Just get to the point.
Yeah,
right.
So we've got an intern on our team right now. He's just like, just tell me what to do. And I'm like, I'm not here to tell you what to do. I want you to value what I value. He's like, dude, just please tell me. I just want to know what to do. Tell me what to do.
I want you to discover what I value too. I don't want to tell you what I value. I want you to go on a journey with me and discover the depths of what I.
Oh, it's so true.
This is why you love the Erwin McManuses and the Rob Bells and all those guys.
Okay,
Rob who? Rob
I gotta say, when you're into our church plant, we are at a Jesus Culture Conference. You're speaking. You share. They taught me how to plant a church, but they never taught me how to process my pain. Oh. And I was sitting there that night, 1 year into a church plant, and I was like, no one taught me how to plant a church or process my pain. And I mean, it wrecked me in the best possible way because I was kind of militant before that about pushing through. And like, you set me on a path of healing. It was
there
awesome.
we go.
Okay.
No,
So, Bannon, did you
you.
hear that, Bannon?
Bannon,
did you hear that?
I was so poetic.
God's using
Who brought the encourager in this podcast? I'm over here making fun of you.
This is the best podcast ever.
I'm making fun of you.
I need you.
So, okay, well, Poetic Nate, very quickly, give some history. Give like the short abridged, like Cliff Notes history. What are you doing right now? You're in Redding.
Okay.
I could tell it all for you, but go ahead.
You could. I'm in Redding, California. 18 years ago, my wife and I started a church.
Yep.
So we celebrated 18 years on Sunday.
It's called The Stirring, which you'd think it's a coffee shop, but it's really a church.
Oh. Yeah.
Let me ask this real quick. The creative side of you, have you wanted to change the name like 10 times just because the creative side of you doesn't want to stay with?
Yeah.
I feel like Banny doesn't like the name of your church.
I love it. No. I love the name of his
That's
church.
what Banny just said. Banny, he said, like, do you really like the name The Stirring?
Stop. You did not.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you.
About 10 years in, I was torn, and I really wanted to change our name. So I had 2 names that I was kind of thinking about, and our team convinced me to stay with The Stirring.
Really?
I thought if you're going to change your name 10 years, that's when you change your name.
Yes, absolutely.
Now we're 18 years in.
Yeah.
We're like an adult now.
Yeah.
You can't change your name.
You can't.
Change your name.
We are in. We are
Edwin,
like, we're
it's your name, buddy. Just deal with it. Yeah.
Yeah, most of the time when churches change their name, I'm like,
Yeah,
What
you doing okay?
You're like, there's something.
Yeah, yeah.
You're
Doing
trying
okay?
to rebrand. You're trying to.
Something tells me Elevation isn't just going to randomly change the name of their church one day.
Now, Banning did at one point. He said, "Hey, if you want to become a Jesus Culture church, you could be Jesus Culture Reading."
Yeah, we've had this conversation. We've said, can you imagine if I asked you to change the name and you became Jesus Culture Reading? And they're like a mile down the street from Bethel. Like, that's not going to happen.
that would
Do you
go.
remember the two names? And do you look back and go,
Interesting.
they are pretty cool?
Yeah, I think so. One was House.
Oh, I like that.
House, but
Oh.
now everyone's
I
naming
know
the
you
church
were about
House.
10 years ahead of everybody else on that one.
I was
Yeah.
the forerunner on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, House and the other one, I don't remember the other one.
It didn't stick with you. Well,
No, maybe Bethel or something like that. But it was
Hey,
taken.
I was the creative at a church that changed its name 4 times.
What?
No.
So I was the one that had to go on the website and change all the
but why would
letterhead.
they do
and
that?
all
Like
the-
after a while, you're just like,
I
no
know.
momentum.
Yeah.
Wow, that
Yeah.
would be hard.
It
All
was
right.
intense.
Well, Drew, introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name's Andrew Gard, and I pastor a church called Grace City in Lakeland, Florida, and we got a spot in Tampa as well with my amazing wife, Christina.
And let's just clarify this right now. You have the biggest church out of all 4 of us. So if we could just, let's just put that out there right now. Let's just make sure that
You're so
it's just
stupid.
true. I joke around about that. You really do. I'm kidding about it. But such a phenomenal work that you're doing out there. I'm sarcastic right now about this, but there really are a few churches that I just am more impressed with. Honestly, I don't just say that. When I'm out with you, your leadership culture, what you're building, your intentionality, the community, the loyalty, the of your staff and everything else. It's so beautiful.
Thanks,
so
man.
it's really cool.
We love our team, yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad you're on the podcast. And Rachel, this is your first time on the podcast.
It's my first time.
Okay,
Yeah.
I say this, but it's kind of a, I think this is a bucket list for a lot of people.
I-
So,
oh, it is. This is
so
the pinnacle.
just
It's a high mark.
I've
This is the
arrived.
pinnacle.
Yeah.
You have
arrived.
arrived.
Yeah.
You can
Tomorrow's
put it
gonna
on
be
a-
let down.
Yeah, we're
you
gonna
know?
give we're gonna give you a T-shirt.
Well done.
Really quickly, tell us about yourself.
My husband and I planted Mission Church in Walnut Creek, which is the Bay Area, California, 7 years ago. 2 years before the pandemic started, then we relaunched out of that. At what point do you stop saying you're a church planter?
Good question.
Yeah,
Right?
I
Is
think
it
5
5?
years. I think it's
You
5.
did-
Yeah, I think after 5, you're trying too hard on
Yeah.
acting like you're a kid. But that'd be my opinion. Or maybe it's when you get a building. It could just be when you get a building. Would you have an opinion on when you stop calling yourself a church plant? That's an interesting question.
Man, it depends on the church.
Depends on how it's going.
It depends on the
Yeah.
church.
If you're not growing, you're still a church plant.
You're
Yes.
like, we're here trying to figure it out. I feel like 5 years
Yeah.
is a good mark, I feel like.
But throw in a pandemic and it messes things up.
Well, so I would agree. And here's
Yeah.
the deal for me. We celebrated our 10-year anniversary, but this
Wow.
is I'm not being melodramatic. We pretty much replanted our
Yes.
church
Right.
in January of 2022. So when we hit the
Yes.
10-year mark, I'm like, we are celebrating 10 years, and that is accurate. But I feel like we're
Yes.
3 years old. I feel like we're
Okay.
3
Yes.
years old.
Okay, so I'm going to push back a bit with Banning.
Whoa.
So before Banning planted Jesus Culture, they had a movement called Jesus Culture. Mm-hmm. Do you remember this? So Banning says to me, I'm thinking about planting a church.
You mean
And he
are you
invites
talking
me.
about the worldwide movement of Jesus culture?
I'm talking about the phenomenon of Jesus Culture, the
heard of it.
global
I've heard of
global
it.
movement. So Banning says, hey, I've got a houseboat. Come out on the houseboat for a day and just everything you know about church planting. Just
Because
tell me.
when you lead a global movement, you have a houseboat.
Yeah, no.
So you have a houseboat, exactly. He said, I just bought a houseboat. It's
That's
amazing.
Redding's version
There's
of
a hot tub
that's
on
Redding's
top.
version of a yacht.
Exactly. So listen, we go out on a houseboat. We spend a day, and I ask him. This happened.
Is this when I broke your lip or something?
This is when
Keep
you
going.
did. You
Yes.
broke my face, blood
Yes.
everywhere. But that's not the story I was
Okay,
going to
keep
tell.
going.
Thank you for hijacking the moment.
Thank you, go.
So we're on a houseboat, and I said, so like you're planning a church. What does it look like? He said, well, we've got 68 paid staff. We've got 100,
Stop.
Not really.
140 people.
He's
We've got
exaggerating.
6 departments already that are thriving.
Oh, yeah.
The church is going to be the 7th department.
Yeah,
We're
7
adding a department.
7
And I
famous
told him-
worship
I
leaders.
told him, I said, Banning, you're not like Banning did not plant a church. He planted a movement.
planted a
He
movement.
took a movement and he sowed it in the
Now,
ground.
to
We
be
all know
fair,
it.
To be fair, I definitely planted a church in January 2022.
Yes,
Whatever
you did.
happened in
Okay.
COVID reset me.
Okay,
to,
that's true. That's true. You did plant.
we said the same thing. We didn't. So we planted. We came down with like a staff, a ton of people, and all these famous worship leaders. That's how we planted. So it grew pretty quick. And then we lost 75% of our people during COVID. But when we planted in San Diego, we used to do the same thing. We've never really planted. So we sent to San Diego like full-time pastor, full-time administrator, full-time youth pastor, full-time worship pastor,
4 creative directors,
full-time children's pastor, full-time
hilarious.
production guy. We just sent the whole team down there. And so he goes to, and they started with a building day one, and he went down there. He's
massive
like,
building.
He goes, I'm sorry, this doesn't count.
It's
either.
not a.
This doesn't count.
No. My wife and I gathered 8
He's right.
friends in the basement of a Nazarene
Yes.
church, and we cried out to God, like God had to move, or we wouldn't have a church. But you had a church.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I don't know. This is I do think you look down your nose at me, but whatever. So
I don't. Well, kind of.
So you planted. Did we cut you off in this
No.
little story? Yes, that's
No,
how it
no,
is.
no.
So here's the conversation I'd love to have today. Again, these are people. Anybody who's listening right now around the world are either pastors or church leaders, or in some way they're in the trenches of building a local church, have a heart for the local church, even if it's in a volunteer standpoint. One of the things that I think COVID exposed, by the grace of God, I think He exposed it and then invited us to go deeper, is that it seemed that, and I'm going to say this in the Western world, I know that there's people that listen to this outside of just Western culture, but in Western culture, it felt like it was, and I don't want to be dramatic, but it was a great revealer of a lot of immaturity in people. So when we look at Ephesians 4, the concept of maturity there is that you look like Jesus,
Right.
the fullness of Jesus, and that when storms come, you're not tossed. You're not thrown all about. Well, all of a sudden, COVID comes, and you're like, wow, these are people that have literally been in my church for years now. Come every week.
Yeah.
And yet what's coming out of you doesn't look like Jesus. It doesn't look like maturity. Wow. And it's not just the vitriol or anything. It was just immaturity of, and then they were just getting tossed too. They were just getting thrown around. And it wasn't just COVID, but you just begin to see this. And one of the things I began to realize was like, why aren't we necessarily producing mature believers? This is such a broad statement I'm making. I think in all of our, there should always be immature believers in our churches. So I don't know what the percentage is. Should it be 60% that are immature or 60% are mature?
Because it's the immature people that mature us.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, totally. That's exactly
need
right.
them.
Just pastors. But I came across something that there's 3DM, which is a discipleship organization, kind of came up with this thing called the High Invitation, High Challenge Matrix. I don't want to go through all. You can look it up online if you're listening. But it's pretty much saying this, that if you have a high invitation culture with low challenge, it becomes a consumer culture. If you have low invitation and low challenge, it becomes kind of a boring culture. If you have low invitation, high challenge, it becomes burnout. And the sweet spot for discipleship and maturing is when you have a high invitation but high challenge culture. And by high invitation, I think we all understand it's that you're loved, come, welcome, everybody's accepted. But that high challenge, which is no, you gotta pick up a cross and die, and you gotta mature, you gotta grow.
Yeah.
And I think, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on this actually, because I could be off. But somewhat as I look at the landscape, and I hate general statements, so I'm just gonna make them though. When I look across the landscape, I see a lot of preaching that feels very high invitation, but seems to lack like challenge. And I'm going like, is this why we don't have the amount of mature believers? This is just an open conversation now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Can you guys process with me a little bit, and with the pastors that are listening, around why is it that it feels like there are maybe more immature believers sometimes than there are mature believers? And do we feel like there's a lack of challenge? Do we feel like maybe we've swung to this high invitation kind of culture? Is it because there's not one-on-one discipleship? Is it because we're not, I don't think everything has to happen from the pulpit. So this is something that I'm wrestling with and wanting to begin to have a conversation with pastors about. How do we actually create environments that are high invitation, high challenge? Why don't we have them? And is that the reason why maybe I think the Lord revealed and invited?
Wow.
There's a lot there that you just said.
Totally.
And I think some of it depends on what environment you walk in. That's why I love that they talk about, I mean, we probably have all been in environments that are very high challenge, very low invitation.
100%, yeah.
And vice versa, as you said. I think the biggest thing that takes place whenever these conversations happen, and you're going to have people on both ends of the spectrum, because, we live in a day and age where pastors, like, if you don't preach about a certain thing, you're a coward. And people use weird language, like, we're the octagon or something like that.
Yeah.
Like, this is bizarre.
And this isn't for me just about the pulpit.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's about the
100%.
culture. Go ahead.
Yeah, and so I think oftentimes what gets us into trouble is we convolute the context and the message. And we think they're the same thing. So I'm a firm believer that the context should be high invite.
Yes.
High invitation. When people walk into our churches, man, are they feeling welcomed?
Yes.
Man, when they join a city group, are they feeling
Yes.
welcomed? Are they around? Right? The Apostle Paul said in 1 Corinthians and in Romans, right? That I'm doing what I can to remove every stumbling block.
Yep.
That's what I'm trying to do. And yet the scriptures also tell us that Jesus is a stumbling block to the Jews and folly to the Gentiles.
Well, that's a great word.
And so I think what's being talked about there, the context, which is what the Apostle Paul is talking about, is going, man, I'm trying to get out of the way. I'm trying to create an environment, a space, a life that is very inviting, while at the same time, the message is offensive. So the message is going to be offensive. So then as leaders, at least at Grace City, we're trying to do everything we can to make the context as inviting as we can be, because the content is the content. The content is offensive. It is. And so I think sometimes people convolute those things, and they don't know how to differentiate those things. So then they go, oh man, the message offends, and so they assume, well, our context is going to be offensive. And it's like, no, your context doesn't have to be offensive. And so I think that's what happens in this conversation. I think for us, that's how we try to do both, of going high invite and then super high challenge. You know, we're very much at Grace City, we're very in your face preaching with a smile on our face. Yeah. It's like we don't mince words. I don't mince words. Our context is what it is, but also at the same time, it's incredibly warm, incredibly encouraging. And so it leaves people with this kind of feeling of, whoa, I'm like getting hugged and discipled. Because at the end of the day, right, the invitation is life transformation. Yeah. The invitation isn't like, come and stay where you're at. You know, it's not come as you are and stay as you are. It's come and be transformed by the gospel. So I think for us, that's the tension that we're always trying to manage.
I love that. It's a great. I love that.
Yep.
Yeah, it's that sense that Jesus meets us where we are, but never leaves us where we are. And I think for us is the stirring. I think we've had seasons where it's, you know, we've offended people on both ends. There's always people that think we should be more truth and we should be more, more preaching this or more hardcore gospel. And then there's always people on the other end that are like, we've got to embrace people more. We've got to become more inclusive and embracing. Right. And one of the ways that we've said it is Jesus is both. He's both fully love and fully truth. And Jesus doesn't have to bend love to be truth. He doesn't have to bend truth to be love. He's both. John chapter 1, Jesus says, come and see. Like his first words to the disciples, come and see. That feels really invitational. Like, come and see. Yeah. Come discover what's happening here. Yeah. Last chapter in John, come and die. Pulls Peter aside in that moment and says, hey, if you really follow me, you're gonna end up on a cross. And Peter in that moment, immediately he looks to John. What about him, right? You know, and Jesus says, you follow me. And so there has to be a journey, I think, come and see to come and die. There's got to be both. Right. And I think we've fought, just like what you said, Andrew, we've fought in our culture to go, like truth is love.
Right.
So preaching what is true is the most loving thing I can do, or leading in truth. But also
we use the term clarity as kindness.
Yeah, clarity as kindness.
Yeah.
And loving people deeply is actually true. Yep. And so there are some right now that feel like there's this war between love and truth, but Jesus is both and doesn't have to bend one to be the other.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. You know, I have to go back to even my own family story and testimony, which informs so much of how we leave. You know that Tyler and Andrew, Tyler, my husband, and Andrew are childhood
Rachel's
best
like
friends.
my sister.
Like we're like brother and sister. Yes, our family's vacation together.
Before we started recording, I said something wrong about you, and he pounced on me.
Oh my
gosh. Like big brother over there. I'm like, dude, back off. I know her too, all right? I like, stop it. Like, he was pretty defensive of you already. Yes.
Hey, that's so sweet. Thank you.
No, don't do that. Okay.
So you guys, I mean, how old were you when you guys...
So I was 17 when I gave my heart to Christ.
Okay. So Tyler, my husband, Andrew are, childhood best friends. Andrew is a heathen, and he gets like radically saved, right? And
that's
my husband,
for another podcast.
Oh, it's a good story.
I want to be on that one.
It's a great story. So my husband is just kind of like, he's a nice guy.
Yeah.
But grandma led him to the Lord at 4, but he's kind of like there for the ride. Like that kind of guy.
Yeah, that was Tyler.
That was Tyler, right? And so Tyler's at basketball practice. These guys had a Bible study, and Tyler was always skipping out on it because he's just wishy-washy, right? So he's coming home from basketball practice, and he literally says he had to go in his room and shut the door, and for 3 hours he had this dramatic encounter with the Lord at 16 years old. He's weeping, he's crying, the honey, all of it, like, you know, repentance. He encountered God, called to ministry, life changed forever, right? He calls up Andrew, and he's like, bro, you're never going to believe what happened to me. And Andrew's like, I bet I will. We were praying for you last night at Bible study.
Come on now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so it's like, you look at somebody who was wishy-washy, 1 foot in, 1 foot out, and all of a sudden somebody prayed for him. He has a dramatic encounter with the Lord, and his life has changed forever. I think dramatic encounters with the Lord change people's lives forever. Yes. I don't know if you know this about me, but I worked at Sony Pictures marketing films for all of my 20s. And I was a little wishy-washy, 1 foot in, 1 foot out. I love the Lord. I served in church.
Are you serious?
Yes.
I would never believe that about you. No, keep going.
Oh, I mean, I grew up in church. I love the Lord.
I know.
But it's like in my mid-20s where I had dramatic...
You're one of the most committed believers I know, though. So I'm just saying, that's what I'm saying. It's a little bit weird to think of you 1 foot in, 1 foot out.
Well, it's like it was encounters with the Lord in my 20s where all of a sudden I went from pursuing that life to I'm going to move up to the Bay Area. I'm going to take a massive pay cut. I'm going to move away from my family, from my friends. And all of a sudden, this extreme dramatic obedience was so easy for me because I fell in love with Jesus.
Wow. Yeah.
So I feel like for us, we're always trying to create these moments where people can have dramatic encounters with the Lord, where all of a sudden the list, all the things that we're supposed to be obedience, it's not just a list anymore. It's like, oh, I'm compelled. I love Jesus. What he wants me to do what? I didn't know. Okay, I'll do it. You know, and it's of course not that cut and dry all the time. It
is. I love that because you're describing kind of like high challenge can only happen in a high intimacy environment.
Yes.
Like if you're not actually inviting people into an intimate relationship with Jesus, that all of my obedience is birthed out of love.
All of it.
Any obedience I do, it has to. So I have to invite you into that intimate relationship so that, I love what you're describing, so that from that place, because high challenge is just high obedience at the end of the day.
Right.
A high challenge environment is just obey God.
Right. Do what he says.
But obeying God is birthed out of the intimacy of I'll give you everything, Jesus.
Yeah.
Well, and I think the thing that I would add to this conversation as it pertains to leaders, I think sometimes the reason why probably we are maybe intimidated or whatever, have moved away from a high challenge. You know, there was a moment in preaching where it moved from aspirational leadership. I'm going to talk about this a little bit tomorrow morning at Pastor's Conference.
That's the conference
you should come to. Exactly. Ding. But we went from like aspirational leadership to what I'm kind of calling I'm just like you leadership.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think for a while, like I remember hearing even like, you know, pastor that I know talk, he would give illustrations, and the point of the illustration was to intonate that I'm just like you. And I think it really, really hurt us. It hurt the high challenge thing. And so I think sometimes that's why you have a lot of pastors
that's interesting.
Falling, is because we wanted to so identify with people as communicators to say, look, I'm just like you. I almost got in a fight playing basketball too. I'm just like you. And the problem is, when you say that to a pastor, I might know what you mean, but the people listening to us don't know what we're saying. And I think we need to go back to aspirational leadership, being leaders that people go, I don't want my leaders to be just like me.
I don't want my leaders to get in a fight in the basketball court. I'm trying to get to maturity.
And so I think
that's interesting.
So I think we're not really calling people to high challenge because we're still trying to carry this old wineskin of I'm just like you. And it's like, if by just like you mean, that you have pressures and stresses and temptations, yes. But if you mean, I'm angry and frustrated and embittered, then no, I'm not just like you.
Yeah, boy.
And so I
because Jesus has done something in my life.
100%.
Yes.
And so I think that's a huge component is we need more aspirational leaders. And you will not call people to high challenge if you are not an aspirational leader.
And I do think much of this, when I look at the conversation of much of when I see lack of challenge, I do think probably at the heart of it where it started was we're just trying to reach people.
Yeah.
We're trying to somehow relate to them. Yeah. We're trying to somehow remove whatever. Tell me this real quick. I would love to actually know from a preaching standpoint. You're preaching, but not, how much are you preaching? little bit here and there?
A little bit here and there. Newer to that.
Yeah. I'm going to tell you right now, guys. I kid you not. I'm going to say it on the podcast. I've said it to you. Such a call to preach. So good. I'm not just
I tell
saying
Tyler that all the time.
all the time. When I was there, I said the same thing. Genuinely, I think that when I've heard you preach, such a great preacher, and I think you have a real call in your life to preach. So let's just lay this out real quick. We want high invitation, high challenge, but high challenge has to come from high intimacy. So we're saying this isn't a legalistic thing. This isn't a guilt thing. This is just out of love for Jesus.
Right.
You want to obey him radically.
Yeah.
But when it comes to preaching, walk me through right now how you're navigating what feels like so much pressure on social media or whatever else. Or even in our church, they want us to deal with something. They want me to talk about this, or they want me to talk about this, or we need to talk about sin more. We need to talk about, the sexuality issue more. We need to talk about whatever. Now, I practically just want to sit down with people and go, so help me understand. I don't, but I'm like, so if I preach that for 2 weeks and people are every other weekers or once a monthers or once every 6 weekers, I'm not going to hit our entire church. And then what about all the new people that come? So I think there's a lack of strategy. Here's it's a really big point. How are you navigating how much you're doing from the pulpit, what you address from the pulpit compared to what you address in community and discipleship? Does that make sense? Because some guys are just on the pulpit full on going at culture wars or just going after sin or whatever else. Do you guys actually walk that out a little bit of we don't go hardcore after sin from the pulpit because we believe that stuff should be walked out in discipleship ways, or are you going hardcore after sin? Does that make sense what I'm asking?
We go hardcore after the root of the sin.
Okay.
We go very hardcore. So sometimes people will go, man, well, how come we don't preach about this specific issue more? And I'll get a lot of things in as illustrations, but why don't we talk about this? Now, it's always interesting because people never come to me and say, man, I wish you preached on divorce and remarriage more.
Yeah. It's their pet. It's their pet. Yeah, it's their
The
pet
Bible
thing,
talks about that.
Yeah.
And so it depends on whatever their pet
or
thing is.
laziness.
Yeah. And
Exactly.
so we talk a lot about the root of sin because everybody's dealing with that.
Yeah.
I don't want to spend an inordinate amount of time
Great
on
word.
a Sunday talking about a very specific thing that maybe 8% of my congregation is navigating when I can talk about pride, I can talk about lust, I can still talk about, but I want to talk about the root of these things. So I'm pulling everybody into the conversation. And maybe in that 40-minute message, there's a one-off kind of thing over here, but I'm just very careful. And then at the end of the day too, I'm not going to get bullied into talking about anything when I have painstakingly paid the price to nurture the call of God on my life, and I'm not going to let somebody else tell me how to steward that platform when it's I think about it all the time. And so I think we deal very aggressively with the root of sin rather than getting bullied and talking about these branches of it.
But Nate, what would your take be on what happens from the pulpit versus what happens in discipleship?
That's a great question. We have spent years building an underground discipleship movement, and what I found is the more life on life we do off stage, through life groups, through our Emerge discipleship movement, the more that people have tables that they're at to work out the deep stuff, the more that we can actually preach from the stage. So there are things that we might not hit hard from the stage because we're doing that hard work in discipleship. And part of it, even when I think of the LGBTQ community, we have a huge heart to reach that community. And so if I make that the thing that I'm going after from stage, then the church is no longer safe for them to come to Jesus. But we are dealing with deep sexual issues and transformation.
What
and
would
all
you say
that.
to people who say you're just you're scared, or that people need the gospel preached in fullness? What?
Yeah, we get it all the time. Some guy wrote me a letter a few weeks ago and just said, if you don't start preaching the gospel, your church is going to fall apart. And I've no idea who he is. Maybe he's been there twice. So there's
came from my email.
Yeah, and in the past 5 years, the amount of pressure coming at us as preachers to preach this agenda or that thing, or you're not preaching the true gospel. So we preach through books. We just preach the word. And if it's in the word, we're going to preach it. I don't avoid anything but how you preach certain things matters.
Yeah.
Depending on who you want to reach.
Yeah.
And so for us, like I want our house, I want our living room safe for anyone to come and see and encounter God. And like you said earlier, I don't want to put obstacles in front of their way. Does that mean that I'm not preaching certain things? No, but it's the spirit in which I preach it.
Yep.
The love that comes behind the truth, and the truth and love. I think in a lot of environments, like when Paul, when he talks about speaking the truth in love, I think there are too many that love speaking the truth. Which is different than speaking the truth in love. If you're not in love, you've got to be in love. I think, so for me, as a preacher, I've been on this journey. In my 20s, I just wanted to impress people. In my 20s, I wanted to impress and keep them. I didn't realize how little I was. I wanted to keep. I wanted to keep people. I thought if I could preach and lead in a certain way. And so I had this fear of man for years that became more and more obvious. I wanted to impress people and keep people. In my 30s, enough relationships fell apart. There was enough pain. There was enough betrayal. Enough broke in my 30s that as I came into my 40s, that wanting to impress people and keep people shifted to, I want to help people and form people. And I'm sharing this because for me, in my 40s, this idea of I don't need to impress people, I actually want to help people. I want to preach in a way that forms the church and helps the church. And what it did for me, it allowed me, when I could get out of trying to impress and keep and really form and help people, it allowed me to actually preach more truth in love and love people more in truth. And so it changed my preaching. I would say the last few years, my preaching has a depth that some would come and say, now you're finally preaching the word. And I go, no, I just had, God had to deal with things in me, because when I get in front of the church, it's not about being impressive. I want it to help people, and I want it to form people. And, I think it's Mike Breen says, if you're trying to build a big church, you rarely get disciples. But if you're really forming people, if you really love the people that you're preaching to, and if you really want to help them, then you always get a great church. So for me, I feel like God had to deal with the fear of man so that I could come into a place where I'll preach anything now because I can do it in a spirit of love.
And the thing that I would add to that, and you kind of hit on this earlier, is I think too, I try to be an equal opportunity offender. So that's always my goal. Is I
want to hear about this.
I want to make fun of everything.
Yes.
To be honest,
the problem with Drew is the problem with Andrew between us three is he actually doesn't care if anybody likes it. He's like, I'll just go home and play some
probably do a
fall. You care that people like it. He's like, I don't care so much. I know, that's the problem. I know.
It's a blessing and a curse.
He's like, I don't care if you like me.
This thing will go back to 50 people in a living room.
I'm going to offend everybody.
But to be honest, it's like even during this political landscape, I'll make fun of the goofy stuff on the conservative side. I'll make fun of the goofy stuff on the left side. I'll call out all the idols and so that honestly, it kind of helps, because I think, if I'm somebody, who's a part of that community that you mentioned, and it's just bully ball on me the entire time, then it's like, okay. But if it's like, oh, this guy's kind of coming for everybody.
That's amazing.
Then I have found people who are part of that community will roll with us.
Yes.
If it's not like, oh man, this guy's just coming after our sacred cows. He's coming after all
or
of them.
after this one pet sin. This drives me crazy too. I'm like, dude, you have one pet. These guys want you to preach on something.
Yeah.
Right. I'm like, there's 15 unjust, unrighteous things that I can be preaching on. You have one that you care deeply about, and you think that's the one I should only be preaching
It's
on.
probably the sin they find the grossest.
Yes, that's exactly right. It's the sin they don't understand.
Yeah.
Or the sin
the one they're struggling with.
Struggle with.
Exactly.
No. Half the time, because even when this Israel thing, which and I listen, I don't have to qualify this. Like, we are for Israel and pro-Israel, and really believe deeply in the plan of God there. But and sometimes I'm like, dude, I think everybody in the room agrees with me. So half the time I'm like, I'm going to be preaching something just to make y'all feel better. But you all agree with me on this point. But so, they want to come up and say, hey, why aren't we preaching more on Israel or whatever? And I'm actually honest. I'm like, well, one, I actually don't think I can do a great job. Like, in all honesty, I have a grid for it, but I'm not sure I could really unpack in a way that's super meaningful.
Right.
Besides, I think we should be,
Well, we live in a day and age where people like Google for 5 minutes and then they're an expert on a particular conflict
I
that's
try
been
to be
happening
really careful
for
about
years.
that. Like, I'm not going to unpack something that I don't know if I can really unpack. But anyways, and people may say, well, you should be able to, whatever the point is. But really what I'm finding is I'm like, you want me to preach on that just so that you feel better that I agree with you about that thing that you want me to agree with you about. You're not wanting me to teach this so that you learn more.
Right.
You already have your opinion in place,
Yep.
and you just want to know that I agree with you. That's why you want me to preach it more.
Yes.
And it's not just Israel. It's like whatever else is the issue.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, and it changes in different rooms in different states,
exactly right.
It's like you can be in a room in a really conservative area and you make this huge statement about fighting back against, sexual sin, and everybody's going to cheer for you.
Yes.
And it's almost about pleasing that room of people
Right,
instead of
100%.
pleasing God. And then you could be in another environment that's maybe more liberal and you're going to talk about fighting social injustice and everybody's going to cheer for you
Yes, exactly
because that's
right.
popular in that room. And it's like, man, no, lift up the name of Jesus.
And tick everybody off.
Tick yeah,
perfect.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's what I'm taking from this podcast.
Exactly.
Thank you, Andrew.
Exactly.
Well, do you know what's interesting too is even as you're talking about not just shifting, find out what you're called to.
Boom.
Like I think that I have to come to the realization that we're not the church for everybody.
Yeah.
And we're not going to be the church we're not going to meet everybody's need
Yes.
and everybody's season. And there's a lot of churches out there. And I'm not the Walmart of churches where
Right.
you're going to find whatever you want. Like at the end of the day, like this is what the Lord's put on our heart. This is what the Lord's called us to. And this we're going to go after. I really got freedom on this because I was with Bill one time. And Bill Johnson, who pastor up in Reading. I don't know if you've heard of him. He's a guy that I mentored for about 18 years up in Reading.
That's right.
Just poured my life into him. And but I was with him somewhere, and a guy was just preaching on end times. A brilliant message on, it was actually what Corey was speaking about on the 10 virgins. I mean, a brilliant message on intimacy and the end times and all that. But he makes this statement. You have to be preaching on end times. There's more scriptures on end times that Jesus talks about than any, like da-da-da-da-da. This guy, great preacher, and you're kind of like, he could probably sell anything, I'm like, oh. So we're flying back to Reading, and I said, Bill, what'd you think about that message? He goes, it's in the Bible. I said, why don't we preach on end times more then? He goes, it's not what stands out to me when I read Scripture. He said when he reads Scripture, it's what stands out to him. When I read Scripture, something else stands out to me.
Exactly.
And in a moment, he was able to kind of
great.
wrap his arms around all of it. But I think there needs to be a confidence that says, you know what?
It's great.
When I read Scripture, this is the mandate. This is what I feel I'm supposed to be going after. And we can't, guys, 52 weeks out of the year.
Yeah.
I mean, when we're talking about preaching from the pulpit, 52 weeks out of the year, and they're only going to come to, like, the really dedicated people are coming to 2/3 of them type deal.
Wow.
You only have and then I'm not preaching at all of them. So we have certain things we have to go after.
Yeah.
And that means that maybe there's another church that's going to be talking about something else that emphasizes that, that maybe that's the church you have to go to. And I think we have to have a little bit of a freedom of, this is who we are.
Different people have different graces. Different houses have different graces.
Absolutely.
I
remember,
can't be everything for everybody.
I was at art conference and they were interviewing. Dino was interviewing
Yeah,
Joel
love Dino.
Osteen,
Okay.
and he's interviewing
Joel Osteen, who? Never heard of him.
And
Does he have a church here in America?
And he was interviewing Joel Osteen, and Joel's up there, and he goes, when I first took the church from Daddy,
Yeah, totally. That's totally.
and
Way to nail the Joel Osteen.
and this is what he said. He goes, I was trying to preach all this and do all this stuff, and it just wasn't working. It was weird. And I remember going, what have I always been good at? I've always been good at encouraging people.
Yeah.
And so he said, you know what I do? I get up there and I encourage people, and people will criticize. And this is what he said. He goes, people,
he gets.
He goes, people will criticize me, and they're like, where's this? Where's that? Where's the discipleship? And he goes, you can't disciple people in a 30-minute television program.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
He goes, there's all this other discipleship that's taking place in our church.
That's exactly
and I just
right.
thought, and when he said it, it was like, how can you argue with that?
Yeah.
How can you argue with him going, this is my grace. I've been graced to just encourage people. I know. So that's what I do.
Well, half the
love
time
that.
Bethel used to get blown up because people were like, hey, I was at a service and they never once preached the gospel. And what they're talking about is they didn't do a salvation call.
Yeah.
Which I think
exactly.
is such a simplistic view of what the gospel
Yeah.
But also half the time I'm like this is about church, a culture.
Yeah.
It's not, it's just amazing.
And sometimes people just aren't listening. Sometimes people just are,
I guess it honestly, as I'm talking right now, I want people to feel like like freedom, permission to go, dude, what's on your heart? Preach that. You don't have to listen to everybody. I mean, I guess have voices in your life that are helping shaping you and mold you and kind of directing you. But I think that there's so much pressure. Around this thing.
100%.
Especially as we're trying to create high challenge environments. I mean, you're probably in, I would say the Bay Area out of all, I'm in Sacramento, Redding, Florida, they're all saved
the nation
in Florida.
of Florida.
They're all Republicans at least, we know that. You're not in a Republican environment.
80% Democrat.
And so I imagine you have even more different pressures of people that are wanting you to.
Well, and I would say, our area is 2 to 4% churched, which is just absolutely mind-boggling. But the beauty of that is you're getting brand new believers, right? So I just got to go back even to what I said before about brand new baby Christians are coming to your church and you're just getting them in the presence of God and encouraging them to read their word and to fall in love with Jesus. And we're creating spaces for that to happen. And, I remember when a lot of things changed for us too, is we were always a praying church, of course, but coming out of the pandemic, we started inviting our church into what our staff was doing. So if we had a prayer time as a staff, we would just open it up to the church, come pray with us. And it started out at the worst time imaginable, like a 9:30 on a Tuesday morning, like nobody's going to come to this, right? But it's like, we're praying as a staff, let's invite our people to be a part of it. And it's grown into the most beautiful thing. Amazing. And as we've leaned into prayer and identified our prayer army and just allowed our church to practice prayer with us, I can't tell you, like, those stories of revival and awakening have just come like rapid fire since we started that out of the pandemic, right? So I feel like I've seen a lot with a lot of brand new baby believers that people don't know. And so if you're teaching them, read your word, pray, encounter God, and they're getting in their word. I can't tell you all the stories of, man, I was living with my boyfriend and I read in the word that we're not supposed to be sleeping together.
Not amazing.
I can't do it anymore, you know, or there's been some big topics that we've taught on, like tithing. We're so nervous to talk about tithing, and we're thinking people are going to be offended, and people are like, I didn't know.
Right.
Thank you. 100%. I didn't know. I want to please God. I'm new at this. So that's been a big part of our journey being in an unchurched region.
Which is actually fascinating because most of the offended people are just Christians. Yeah, that's actually, it's not like new believers. It's like people that have a history with whatever and they're offended by.
Yes.
No, we found the same thing when we think of like Gen Z and Gen Alpha. Like there's this longing for truth right now.
Yeah.
There's a war for truth, and things have been confusing in culture and in the church. And so we're finding, I think it's Tozer says something like the revival we need is a revival of reverence and holiness. And it seems like there's this, I think coming through COVID and coming through the fallout of, so much of the church, the exposure of so many leaders in different movements, we're finding this hunger for what is true.
Yeah.
And so we are adamant about loving the next generation, raising up spiritual fathers and mothers, building family. But you can actually build family and you can pursue and love them and not actually call them to pick up their cross, right? Call them to holiness. And so we're finding right now with Gen Z and Gen Alpha, like there's a longing for like, I want to lay my life down for something. I'm sure you guys are seeing the same thing, but the day of hype is over. And I think they're longing for holy. Yeah. We got to break the fog machines and ask God for the real glory clouds.
I'm not breaking the fog machines. It's not happening.
That's a joke in our church because the church down the street has real glory clouds, and so we've got to,
not according to the internet.
We got to fake the fog. But I think right now, I as pastors and leaders, I think that this next generation is longing for something real.
Yes.
And so we don't have to water down our preaching because it's actually what they're hungry for right now.
Yeah.
Yes.
So good. All right, guys. Now you're just having me think about, I was in the room when that glory cloud thing happened and I was just
Were you really?
Oh, yeah. I was watching online the other day. Some guys like, well, I don't even know how I came across that. They're just putting stuff in the whatever. And this was like not even like a super hard critic, just a guy that they're putting stuff in the whatever. And I'm like, I was like in the room. I was like sitting there and the practical thought, this is a whole side issue, the practical thought of what it would take to actually like, I don't even know how they would crawl up there and put stuff in and do all this type of stuff. I'm like, I don't know what to tell you, dude. I was in the room and it was wild.
So the glory cloud showed up at least 3 or 4 times.
Yeah.
Every time it showed up at Bethel, I was preaching 8 miles down the road at the stirring. So I'm convinced, I told Eric this, I told Chris, Benny knows it. When I preach at the stirring, the glory shows up at Bethel. But I would be preaching and people are just leaving. They're getting texts. The glory showing up at Bethel. People are flooding out.
I've never heard of this.
You haven't heard this?
I've never heard of it.
Can I just say this real quick? Don't Google it. And everybody's listening, don't Google it. It's just going to be a whole bunch of silliness. But you just brought it up, so I had to do it. Guys, listen, I can't tell you. I could sit and talk for hours to all of you guys. I just so wonderful.
Come on.
Thanks for taking some time just to open up some stuff.
having us.
Our privilege.
And so good. Thanks for pouring it to pastors and leaders. Guys, listen, thanks for jumping on. Again, I subscribe, like, do all the stuff. It's not even for me about following, but it really does help us kind of get the word out a little bit more about what's going on in our heart to pour into pastors. So, all right, we'll do it again.